Well, hello, Littles and Jelly Spoons. It's Mr. Parrish, and we're going to talk about some 8th grade math vocabulary. While on YouTube, you might as well go to the closed captioning button and auto-generate the closed captions to the language of your choice, especially those of you who might speak a different language than English as your first language. When a line crosses over two other lines, you're going to have 8 angles. And the alternate exterior angles are the angles that live on the outside of the two lines, and they alternate. They're on opposite sides. If the two lines are parallel, the alternate exterior angles are congruent, which means they're equal. Alternate interior angles are the same thing, but they're on the inside of those two lines. Similarly, if those two lines are parallel, alternate interior angles are equal. Congruent is a word for that. An angle is when you have a union or a connection of two lines that meet up. The spacing in between the two lines is called the angle measurement. They're measured in something called degrees, and you can use a protractor to measure it. The angle sum theorem says that the three angles inside a triangle always add up to 180 degrees exactly. An apothem is a line that connects the center of a regular polygon to the outside of the polygon. It also creates a perpendicular bisection to the outside of the polygon. An axis is a part on the coordinate plane that is either a line going left-right or up-down. The y-axis is the axis going up-down, and the x-axis is the axis going left-right. Bivariate data shows connections between two sets of data. A cluster on a scatter plot is an area on the scatter plot where a bunch of the dots or the points just jumble up. A coefficient is a number multiplied to a variable. Collecting like terms, also known as combining like terms, is when you take objects with the same variable and turn them into one. In this example, you can make up a problem like you have 5 xylophones and you take away 3 xylophones. That leaves you with 2 xylophones. Congruent in geometry simply means that they are the same in measure. They look the same, therefore they are the same. A constant rate of change means that the rate in a problem, like miles per hour, is never going to change. What that looks like on a graph is a perfectly straight line. Consecutive interior angles are two angles on the same side of a transversal on the inside of two lines. Look at the red numbers in this example here. Those are the consecutive interior angles. If the lines are parallel, they add up to 180 degrees. A converse is an argument in which you take the hypothesis and the conclusion and switch them. So in this example, if two angles are congruent, then they have the same measure. The converse is if two angles have the same measure, they are congruent. A coordinate plane, also known as a Cartesian plane, is a way that we graph coordinates or ordered pairs on a two-dimensional figure. It is made up of an x-axis and a y-axis. The coordinate system is just another name for the fact that we have a coordinate plane and ordered pairs and an x-axis and a y-axis. It's just a name for everything. Coordinates, also called ordered pairs or points, is just that. It's a point. It's made up of two numbers, the x-coordinate and the y-coordinate. The x is the first number and the y is the second number. A cube root is very similar to a square root. In a cube root, you look at the number underneath the cube root and ask yourself, what times itself times itself times itself gives me that number? So you're basically undoing a cube. A decimal is the number that appears after a period in a number. It basically acts like a fraction of the whole. A decreasing function is a function that always is losing value. So whenever you're going to the right on the x-axis, the graph is always getting lower on the y-axis. A dilation is when a shape gets either larger or smaller. If you multiply your original shape to a number greater than 1, your shape gets larger. If you multiply your original shape to a number between 0 and 1, it gets smaller. But no matter what, they're similar shapes. Distributive property is when you have a number multiplied to a parentheses, and inside the parentheses you're adding or subtracting or both. You take the number on the outside of the parentheses and multiply it to every single term inside the parentheses. An equation is any number sentence with an equals sign in it. An estimate is an educated guess. Evaluate means to simplify a mathematical expression. The exterior angle theorem states that an exterior angle, seen here in pink, is the same as the two remote interior angles, seen here in blue and green, added up. So you would say blue plus green equals pink. A fraction has a numerator on the top and a denominator on the bottom, and it tells you how many parts out of a whole you have. Frequency is how often something is used in data collection. For example, if there was a class and 5 kids have a birthday in February, the frequency for February would be 5. A function is a relation in which each member of the input, also known as the domain, matches up with exactly one member of the output, known as the range. If you noticed in this, every member on the left side points to exactly one member on the right side. A graph is a visual representation to describe data. There are several types of graphs: line graph, bar graph, histogram. An increasing function is something that is always moving upward as the x-axis moves to the right. So you could say the slope is always positive. Infinitely many solutions means that you have an answer with an infinite amount of solutions. If you're trying to solve an equation, infinitely many solutions looks like the left side and the right side are exactly the same. Or if you're solving a system of equations, they're the same line. The input of a function usually is represented by the x values. It's also called a domain, and they're the values that go into a function. An integer number is any number, positive or negative, that does not have a decimal or a fraction attached to it. Integers could be -5, 10, 0, as long as it doesn't have a decimal and as long as it doesn't have a fraction. An integer is any number, positive or negative, that doesn't have a fraction or a decimal attached. So an integer exponent is any exponent, positive or negative, without a fraction or a decimal attached, like the red numbers seen here. An intercept is created when two lines cross each other. Usually in 8th grade, an intercept is represented by a line going through the x-axis or the y-axis. An irrational number is a number that cannot be turned into a fraction. So those numbers usually go on forever. They don't have a pattern. They're a non-terminating decimal. So typical irrational numbers are pi, or the square root of a non-perfect square. A line is a line, straight, but it does have 2 arrows pointing in both directions. A line of best fit is a line that is drawn onto a scatter plot that seems to point out the best direction for those dots. They don't necessarily go through every single dot, but they do a good job predicting where those dots will go if the graph is drawn further. A line segment is a line where their endpoints are actually 2 dots and not 2 arrows. A linear relationship is a group of points represented in a line. A negative association, also known as a negative correlation, exists on a scatterplot where the dots go down and to the right. If you were to draw a line of best fit, the line of best fit would have a negative slope. No solution exists when there's no answer to a problem. The way you find a no solution in an equation is when the variables disappear and you're left with something where the left number doesn't match the right number. If it's a system of equations, then you're going to have parallel lines. A nonlinear correlation, also known as a nonlinear association, is when you have a scatter plot and the dots don't let you draw a straight line that's going up and to the right or down and to the right. A nonlinear function is a function that is not a straight line when you draw it out. Vertical means perfectly up and down, so a non-vertical line is a line that's not perfectly up and down. A number line is exactly what it sounds like. Negative numbers go on the left, positive numbers go on the right. As numbers go further to the left, those numbers get smaller. As numbers go further to the right, those numbers get larger. An ordered pair is another word for coordinate or point. In an ordered pair, you have two numbers. The first number is the x-coordinate and the second number is the y-coordinate. The origin of the coordinate plane is the point 0, 0. It is exactly in the middle of the coordinate plane. An outlier is a piece of data that just doesn't seem to fit everything else. It doesn't mean that this is not an example of a positive correlation. It's just that dot seems to not be along with everything. An output, also known as the range, is a y-value. It's usually the answer that you get after plugging in an input. Parallel lines are two lines that will never intersect or touch. If you were to graph parallel lines, they will have the same exact slope, but they will have different y-intercepts. A perfect square is completed when you take a number and square it. Also, if you take the square root of a perfect square, you get a perfect rational number. Perfect squares are 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, and so on. A positive association or a positive correlation in a scatter plot is when all of your dots go up and to the right. If you were to make a line of best fit, the slope of that line of best fit would be positive. The power of 10 is usually seen in scientific notation. It basically gives you the opportunity to move a decimal to the left or to the right depending on whether your power is positive or negative. If your power is positive, you can move the decimal to the right. If it's negative, you can move it to the left. A proof is a mathematical statement that allows you to take something that you created, like a theorem, and prove that it's correct. A proportional relationship describes proportional reasoning. Usually it looks like a graph that goes through the origin, and it's going to be a straight line. The Pythagorean Theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, is used to find the missing sides of a right triangle. When using the Pythagorean Theorem, it doesn't matter which one is A or B as long as the hypotenuse, which is the longest side, is C. The Pythagorean Theorem converse is when you have three sides that you're given and you are being asked to prove if those three sides are for a right triangle or a non-right triangle. You take the longest number, let that be C, plug it into the Pythagorean Theorem, and if it's true, it's a right triangle. Quadrants are the four parts of a coordinate plane. The first quadrant is on the top right, and then it goes counterclockwise. So quadrant 2 is the top left, quadrant 3 is the bottom left, and quadrant 4 is the bottom right. A radical is the opposite of an exponent, basically demonstrated by square roots or cube roots. If you're given a radical, you have to figure out how many times a number is multiplied to itself to get you that number. A rate of change is the same thing as a slope, but then it has to do with a change of y value over a change of x value and represents something like miles per hour or feet per second. A rational number is any number that can be written as a fraction. For example, 2/3 is rational. 0.5 is rational because it could be written as 1/2. 3 is rational because it could be written as 3/1. A reflection is a mirror image. The shape doesn't change size, it just changes the direction that it's pointing in. It's still congruent. A relative frequency table is usually a chart that represents a group of people being surveyed. The numbers inside the relative frequency table represent a percentage of people who like or dislike a certain thing. They always add up to 100%, and that's can be seen on the bottom right of the table. A repeating decimal is a number that is a decimal and part of that decimal goes on forever. For example, 0.333333333 is repeating, and you could write that as 0.3 with a line on top of the 3. A rotation, also known as an orientation, is when a shape is spun around a point. The shape doesn't change size, it doesn't get bigger or smaller, it just moves around using a specific angle called the angle of rotation. A scale factor is a number that tells you how big or how small a shape is going to get. The shape is still similar, but if a scale factor is, let's say, 50:1, that shape is going to get 50 times bigger. A scatter plot is a bunch of dots written on a coordinate plane that compares two sets of data. Those dots could represent some type of correlation and show that if the two sets of data have any type of relationship or association to each other. Scientific notation is a way of writing really large numbers or really small numbers by taking a number in between 1 and 10, but not including 10, and multiplying it by 10 to a positive exponent, as you can see in these red numbers here. A sequence is another name for a pattern. Similar figures are two shapes that are the exact same, it's just one is bigger than the other. The angles are going to match up, and the sides are ratios of each other. Similar triangles are two triangles that are the same exact shape, it's just one triangle is bigger than the other. Similar triangles have the same exact angles, the same exact slopes, but their sides are ratios of each other. The slope of a line is the rise over run of the line. It's the change of y values over the change of x values. You count how many spaces you go up, and then you count how many spaces you go over and create a fraction out of that. The slope formula can be used to find the slope of a line using 2 points and no graph. The slope formula is m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1, all divided by x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Slope-intercept form is a way to write out a linear equation. Y equals mx plus b. If y is all by itself, then the number in front of x is your slope, and the number floating around is the y-intercept. A solution in math is a number or numbers that make the statement true. It's basically another way of saying the answer. A square root asks you to find out what number times itself gives you the number underneath the square root. A table of values is exactly what it sounds like. Many times the table of values is going to be x's on the left and y's on the right, and usually you use it to find a slope or to see if that table of values is linear. Substitution is when you take a variable and replace it with a number and then evaluate. A terminating decimal is a decimal that stops. For example, 0.25 stops, so it's a terminating decimal. A transformation is the process of taking a shape and moving it somewhere around a coordinate plane. Before moving the shape is called a pre-image. And after you move the shape, it's now called an image, and you use primes, apostrophes, to represent the new name of the shape. A translation is a type of transformation in which a shape is simply moved from one spot to another. No rotation, no reflection, the shape does not get bigger, it's just a movement. The two shapes are congruent, and all you do is move it. A transversal is a line that cuts through two other lines. If the transversal cuts through parallel lines, that's when you would get alternate interior angles or alternate exterior angles, and you see a lot of congruent angles happening. A two-dimensional figure is a flat shape. It is not three-dimensional, it's just a flat shape, like a square or a circle. A two-way frequency table is very similar to a frequency table, but in this case you're comparing two sets of data. A unit rate is a rate broken down into its simplest form. So if you were to buy 3 pounds of food, you would find the unit rate by taking the total amount and dividing it by 3 so you can find out how much it costs per pound. A variable is a letter used in math to represent an unknown object. A vertical axis is a line that goes straight up and down. On a coordinate plane, the vertical axis is the y-axis. The horizontal axis on a coordinate plane would be the x-axis that goes left to right. The vertical intercept, also known as the y-intercept, is the spot on the coordinate plane where your line goes through the y-axis. It's represented by a b on the slope-intercept form. Volume is how much space an object holds. So if the surface area of a cube is how much wrapping paper that covers the cube, then the volume is how much stuff the cube can hold on the inside. The volume of a cone is how much you can fill a cone with, and the volume is 1/3 pi r squared h. There's a little typo in this picture where the h is missing in the formula. The volume of a cylinder is almost the exact same as the volume of a cone, except the volume of a cylinder doesn't have the 1/3. In this case, V equals pi r squared h, which means that the cylinder is 3 times bigger than the cone, or a cone is 1/3 as big as the cylinder. The volume of a sphere, well, we don't care about the height. We just take the radius, which is the dot in the middle of the sphere and it goes out to the end of the sphere, and we calculate it by doing V equals 4/3 pi r cubed. The x-axis on a coordinate plane is the horizontal axis. It acts left to right. The x-coordinate in an ordered pair tells you how far you're going to go to the left or to the right. If the x-coordinate is negative, then you go left that many spaces. If it's positive, then you go right that many spaces. The x-intercept is the point on the graph where your line crosses the x-axis. It's represented by a point something 0. The y-axis in a coordinate plane is the up and down or the vertical axis. The y-coordinate in an ordered pair tells you how far up or how far down you go when you're creating a point. If the y-coordinate is positive, you go up that many spaces, and if it's negative, you go down that many spaces. The y-intercept is the place on the coordinate plane where your line goes through the y-axis. It's represented by a b, or the number floating around by itself on the slope-intercept form.